Hey everybody, Chris here with Klingspor's Woodworking Shop. Today we're out in my shop and I'm beside my Axiom AR8 Elite. And that's what we're going to talk about is CNC. When you're just getting into woodworking, or maybe you get a new shop and footprint is an issue, or you're just not sure what tools to buy, a CNC is a great option. It allows you to do a lot of things, and as a matter of fact, in some cases, it can replace other tools. Planers, joiners, drum sanders, and many more. As a matter of fact, I did this whole project here without using any of those other tools. I did it all right here on the CNC. Now there is one tool you definitely want to have in your shop, and that is a table saw. Table saws are extremely versatile and probably the centerpiece of pretty much every woodworking shop. Here I'm using mine incorporated with a sled that I made to straight edge joint these two pieces of wood. And you only need one straight edge to get started. So make short work of that and you're ready to straight edge the other side. So once you get your blade adjusted, it's time to adjust your fence. And you'll be using the straight edge that you just created to rest against the fence to create a parallel edge off the blade. Now you've created two straight edges on the table saw. Now it's time for glue up. Now in my case I use these wooden clamps. I really like them. I made them a while back, and essentially they operate based on dowels and two cam clamps that create the pressure and lock everything in place. They work really well. So we've been able to bypass the planer so far, not having to dimension it. We've been able to bypass the joiner to not have to straighten the edge. And we'll throw a few extra clamps on there just for good measure. And once that dries, we'll be hitting the CNC. That's right, we will not need the drum sander or the planer to dimension this lumber or flatten it. Okay, so the first bit we're going to use on the CNC to flatten our material is this Amana RC2255. This is a fantastic bit that does really well for this application, and it can be used in a hand router on a sled if you're trying to use a big slab the old-fashioned way. But in this case, I've taken shims and I've locked down the corners that are warped or twisted. I've got cam clamps along the edge to keep everything locked in from one side into my pin fence. So this slab's not going anywhere. And this bit does a great job at replacing the planer, the joiner, the router, the drum sander, and I could continue on, in this case the wide belt sander as well. CNCs are so versatile. So here I'm continuing on with the flattening of this face, because it's important that you have a flat surface whenever you flip that over, especially if you're going to try to dimension this lumber to a specific thickness, which I am. My project called for 1.5 inches, so I'm taking this 8/4 warped piece, flattening it, getting everything looking good on one side, and then I'll flip it and dimension the other side. And this can take some time, especially if your board is really warped, and in this case this was an air dried piece of lumber that was fairly warped in a couple places, so I did have to remove quite a bit of material. But as you can see, it looks really good. And here's an above view of that same process. And here I've flipped that over. Now let's dimension it to that 1.5 inches. Now for the second bit in our sequence, the 1/2 inch end mill. Now this is a shorter 1/2 inch end mill. It's a 1/2 by 1 1/4, and this is going to do a lot of my roughing work. Notice those shims are gone, so everything's perfectly flat. Now with the CNC, you can reference stuff from the top of the material or the table surface. In my case, I referenced from the table. I know it's going to be a consistent spot, and this will allow me when I cut through to do minimal damage to the table. In theory, and you'll see what I mean by that later. But for now, you can see that 1/2 inch end mill is doing a great job at removing a lot of material quickly and really roughing out the image that I'm trying to create here. And on this particular machine, I am taking out about 1/4 inch per pass, so it's doing a good bit. And you can see the size of the shavings that are coming off. But this does make quick work. You'll not see any fine detail come out of this. This is strictly a roughing pass to get this sort of roughly where I want it to be. And this is what it looks like after the roughing pass. You can see some detail starting. Now let's move on to our third bit, the 1/4 inch ball nose. Now this bit is going to do the bulk of our detail work, and the reason why this is going to do the bulk of the detail is because we used the 1/2 inch bit to do the roughing. So now it's time to do the detail work with this 1/4 inch. Being this state is for the most part fairly flat, this will do a great job at getting us really close to where we want to be, especially on most of the state. And I'll just sit back and let you enjoy the view. Next up is the 1/8 inch tapered ball nose. This is a great bit for a project like this where you've got little detailed areas that need to be cleaned up. Now, I'm not going to run this bit across the entire surface. Instead, I'm using this process called rest machining, which means I'm focused on just the areas that need that detailed cleanup. It would be a huge waste of time and effort for me to try to use this bit across the entire project. Now the last bit in this whole sequence is this 1/2 by 2 end mill. And this is a great bit for getting those deeper cuts and cutting the part free from the blank. Now normally, this would just barely cut through the material and into my spoilboard. But I left this upcoming adventure in because it's important to see that mistakes can happen. The material didn't slip, the machine didn't cut wrong, I didn't design wrong. A bit slipped out of the collet and is about to make my heart start to pound. So let's slow it down so you can watch carefully on the right hand side. Notice it's not just walnut chips coming up anymore. Yep, there it is. This plunged so deeply that it went through that 1.5 inch material and 5/8 into my spoilboard. But that happens sometimes. That's why it's important to hang around your machine and keep an eye on things. No harm, no foul. A little bit of cleanup and the part still came out really good. So now that we've cut that free, it's everybody's favorite thing, sanding. And as we all know, flat parts are sometimes hard enough to sand. Well, 3D pieces are really difficult to sand, but these Klingspor mops make really quick work of it and do a great job of getting down into those details and cleaning up those areas like around the mountain range there. And I decided, because there are a lot of textures across the surface, I went ahead and used it across that whole upper level. So all the little foothills, all the way from hickory to carry, can easily be followed. And that's a 120, by the way. Now normally I wouldn't do something like this, but I wanted to do something cool to really set this off, so I decided to torch it. Yep, torch it. That's the reason why I left that weird little flat border along the edge. So when this is hanging on the wall, my initial hope was that this would really accentuate the part and really focus your eye towards the main part, which is our state. So doing a little torching there to get everything clean. And this is a very finicky process, and you do have to be really careful. Now you'll notice I was a little heavy on the bottom. I did that on purpose. I wanted to really create some shadowing right along the very bottom of our border there. And when it's hanging on the wall, that really does make some nice shadowing. So kind of do a little touch up, make sure everything's fairly even. And there we go. Now I will advise you will want to sand or wipe that down really good after you torch it, and of course after it cools. You don't want to just put finish over that without that. So here's the back with Sealcoat on, and I did choose Sealcoat as my initial seal layer, mainly because this stuff dries really quick, and it's essentially a shellac product, and it brings out the grain very, very well. I like it as a good seal coat for a lot of materials, especially woods like this that are large. It will help the top coat bond really well, and as the material moves, this does a good job of moving with it. This particular seal coat is a thinned down version of standard shellac. Probably one of my favorite products to seal wood and bring the grain out. What do you think? And once that dries, you lightly scuff it, and it's time for your top coat of choice. In this case, I went with the Mohawk Ultra Flow Satin Lacquer. And as you can see, this turned out really well. Originally I was going to go with matte, but after using the Sealcoat and seeing how it made the mountain range pop, I decided to go up a sheen and go with the satin. And you can see those contours just really pop, and it will dull over time just a little bit. But I'm real excited about the project, and I hope you like it too. And if you're wondering what those little black stars are, well, we don't want you to forget where our stores are located in North Carolina. Asheville, Hickory, Winston-Salem, and of course Cary. So come visit one of our stores today, and they can help you find out more and learn more about CNC.